Welcome to the virtual lunch. Today is Thursday, November 4th. This is virtual lunch number 427. Our guest today is Nicolas Leroux, the founder and CEO of Kalexius, an alternative legal services provider. And this is part of our series on understanding new law. Hi, Nicolas. How are you?
Hi, Ari. I'm very fine. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. Nicolas, tell us about your background and the genesis of Kalexius.
I'm a lawyer too. I qualified here in Switzerland and I practiced international law, international arbitration for quite a while before doing something completely different and starting Kalexius, which was almost 10 years ago now. And the idea was to say new law, which was a lot of confusion about what new things could be done. There is still a lot of confusion about what new law is about and what new things can be done, but it was worse at the time. And I thought, let's try and do something new that will help corporate legal departments do things better. So what do big corporations need lawyers for? If you think about it, it's actually pretty simple. It's about keeping in compliance with the regulatory environment in the widest sense. It's about negotiating terms with counterparties, negotiating contracts, and it's about going to court and doing litigation. Broadly speaking, those are the three things. And if you look at those requirements and how they've been addressed until now, lawyers in private practice in law firms addressing those needs. And then relatively recently, actually, big corporations started hiring lawyers in-house and developing those departments. Those departments have been growing exponentially over the last perhaps 20, 30 years. And it's still very much the case that the vast majority of the work of those requirements that I mentioned are served by those two categories. It's lawyers in-house doing effectively more or less the same thing as lawyers in private practice. So what is it in practice? Because as you said, it's a bit amorphous and it coalesced around three things. One part is the people that do secondments. So it's more staffing. It's about having usually highly qualified attorneys for a short period of times for several months or sometimes a year or two going on premise as opposed to lawyers in private practice. The second thing really is working on big projects. So it's about post-M&A integration, about due diligence, about contract repaperings. We do this a lot for the banks, for example, when they have to renegotiate large amounts of contracts. And so once again, it's about mobilizing, deploying a team of lawyers who will be and paralegals and project managers and technology consultants who will be on premise usually and who will be fully embedded with the client's teams and who will deliver this hopefully at a lower cost than the traditional law firms because they have the LSPs usually have, and that's what we sell really. And then the third and last thing, which is a lot of what we do at Kalexius, is outsourcing. So it's really in the same way that the IT department at a big company might have said, we don't want to handle hardware management anymore, or we don't want to handle the first level IT support, which is very time consuming, lots of work and not a lot of value. So we're going to outsource it to a specialist provider that has scale. The IT department can focus on the high level security risk that we have, ransomware attacks or whatever. It's the same thing for the legal department saying, let's stop doing NDAs, let's stop doing those routine vendor contracts so we can focus on the big picture. We can focus on advising the CEO, on advising the board, on really getting time available from or free for our lawyers to focus on those big things. Legal tech is technology, and technology alone will not solve anything. Technology makes sense only if you embed it or if you think about it as a piece of the puzzle in the context of process improvement, reorganization of the department. Often we're talking to potential prospects who tell us, we're looking for tech and say, actually, perhaps what you need is really a service, not just the technology alone. Many people will tell you it's about ownership. It's about an LSP not being a law firm and having a more traditional shareholding structure. The distinction is really about the approach to the work and how you deliver it. It's about having a process-driven approach to the work. So the more traditional law firms will work on a case-by-case basis, will bill on an hourly basis still most of the time, and will do a discrete piece of work and then give it back to the client. The pandemic has had an impact in terms of the perception for sure, because everybody is basically telling us, oh, you've been working remotely from the start, which is true. We've had people working remotely for 10 years now. So everyone must be turning to you because now people accept working remotely. And that's true to a certain extent. We had cases before where, especially when we were doing smaller projects, which are secondments really, where we second one lawyer or two lawyers on site, where we would have clients who said, we need that person on site to be with us every day. And sometimes it didn't work out simply because we had resources in New York and then the client was in Denver, where we have an office. It just doesn't work because we're not in the same location. And that obstacle has disappeared. It's had a big impact on us. The longer term, wider impact in terms of, will it blur the distinction between internal resources and external resources? Because everyone will be working remotely at least part of the time. It's too soon to tell. The sort of people that ALSPs will crave are people that usually have a legal background, so understand what we're talking about. And it's not only about understanding what we talk about, but it's also having the ability to talk and interact with lawyers. And that's a very important point, because consultants and people that have been in the legal sphere for quite a long time, actually, where there's something that is lost in translation when they talk to lawyers, because they just don't see the world in the same way. So it's about having people that have that legal background and also that have an interest in business. The reality is that many lawyers, including in in-house environments, are not that interested in business. If people go to law school and start studying law, it's because they like drafting, or many of them are aspiring writers. And a lot of them really end up doing that work, and they like doing that work. I was speaking at a conference in London, Legal Innovators, 2 weeks ago. It was a senior partner at Magic Circle English firm. She said, I have 35 years of experience and I still get a kick out of very nicely drafted close. She really gets excited about it. And she said, when I talk to my business clients, they don't get it at all. It's like I come from another planet. I can relate to that lady because I have a PhD in international law. I did that. I really still like that. But it's completely irrelevant when it comes to drafting your target operating model. And the thing is that when you go to people like that and say, look, guys, we're going to do a workshop, 2 days, we're going to talk about processes and define the target operating model, what happens inside them is that they go, oh my God, I don't want to do that. And they find themselves talking to those consultants that are really excited about this. And that's where you got the loss of translation between the two sides. The challenge is finding those lawyers that have a genuine interest in that. And of course, they do exist, but it's a minority and we need to find them. Our approach has been to say, working remotely, it works. And we have been working remotely for years when it comes to the senior positions. When it comes to the more junior people, and we do have, because of the nature of the work that we do, as we said before, we have relatively high numbers of more junior people, we don't think it works that well. We think those people have to be in the office at least most of the time because they need to get trained, and they need to get trained on the substance of the work that they do. But it's not only that. They need to be mentored really into how it works in a company, what the dynamics are, how it works in terms of the relationship with the client. What we're finding once again is that it works well for everyone who's experienced, provided that those people can meet in person once in a while. It can be once every week, once every 2 weeks. But yeah, it doesn't work so well for junior people. I was a bit skeptical last year when people were saying the pandemic is going to change everything, it's going to be a watershed. It's relatively true. There's been a big change in terms of attitudes to technology. Unlike what many people might think, is not about getting AI everywhere. It's about using Teams and Zoom and trying to get away from email. Those technologies have been mature, or even e-signature has been mature for a very long time, but it's really been adopted by most, if not all, lawyers over the last year. The disruption that was brought by the pandemic and the fact of people working remotely has made them think consciously and or subconsciously, actually, we can do things differently. So they've been doing things differently in terms of working remotely, but gradually they're looking at other ways of doing things, like using LSPs, like using outsourcing, like saying, okay, perhaps we can reorganize things. And you can see it, an interest, which is for now is quite vague, but in looking at things that are new and at looking at how to do things differently. I don't think we're going to see a revolution in the next 5 years. Lawyers don't like revolutions. That's not how they work. What we're going to see is increased adoption of technology, increased adoption of new delivery models. It's not just that we have two tools which are in the toolbox, which are in-house lawyers and those pricey law firms. This is going to go away in the sense that most people will realize that there are other tools in the toolbox that they can use and they can leverage. And I see that happening and really increasing in the next few years.
Nicolas Leroux, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicolas. And thanks to Kalexius for supporting this series on understanding new law. Great conversation. And I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thanks, everyone.